everyone, welcome to Module 4. The dates for this module are March 23rd to April 5th. It's a 2-week module. However, please be aware that the Easter break is in between there. I did that because it was kind of impossible to split it up into a 3-week session with the Easter break. And this module is dedicated to learning how to support self-regulated learning in the classroom. So Module 4 is, again, about support for self-regulated learning. And throughout this module, what I want you to think about is sort of a backward way of thinking, that when you know something, how do you, as the teacher, help students grow this belief or grow this metacognitive skills. So as you're reading through all of the resources for this module, thinking of that, and I have a few slides coming up to talk about that. Module 4 has a student learning outcome for, again, support for self-regulated learning. So about planning purposeful driven pedagogical approaches that are diversified, increasing student choice and voice, differentiating instruction, and enhancing learners' capacity for self-determination to guide all students towards effective self-regulated learning, and exploring goal setting and motivation. And I think that's very key here, and all of the references take you into deeper levels of knowledge about goal setting and motivation. I continue to come back to the 4 domains of self-regulated learning, and I think that if you use these as your framework for supporting what you do in the classroom, so looking at it from the cognitive lens, from a motivational affect lens, and the behavioral lens, and the metacognition. And if you're really struggling to figure out what's the difference between cognitive and metacognition, I think that's an area that a lot of people struggle with. And if you take a little bit of a treasure hunt through the curriculum guide, you will find some really interesting things about metacognition that will help you understand what it really means. For example, in problem solving, a metacognition would be the student asking them, well, what did I do well in this problem and what were the outcomes? Because that's really not a cognitive thing, like how am I going to put this and this here? It's looking at further down the road of what you did and how you did it. So I encourage you to go through the curriculum to find some of the areas that talk about self-regulation, and they give examples in different areas, and I think that will really help you understand the differences. So again, I bring up this familiar 6 serious challenges for a way of understanding, again, that if you're going to support self-regulated learning, work it backwards of what are some of the challenges or common challenges for students when it comes to self-regulated learning. So I think this module really looks at the motivation aspect of it, and all the details around motivation and what happens when there is no motivation and how to increase motivation and so on. As you read through each resource, there's 5 resources for this module, and they're all focused somehow of discussing motivation and the connection between motivation and self-regulated learning and goal setting. So as you read through the resources, consider how is motivation connected to building students' agency and ownership of learning, to be the director of their learning. Can we motivate students to learn? Is this mission impossible? What are some strategies that you can use to help students become more self-regulated learners? Backward thinking and planning. Just a hint there. How will you model self-regulated learning to foster it in your students? And how will you create learning learning and performance zones and narratives, these narratives in class. How can you support learners to understand the difference? So I think these are all very interesting questions, and as you're going through the resources, consider these. Okay, so I've taken the video out so I can look at my desktop while I'm talking on this particular one. So this slide will be just an audio, and what I wanted to do is go through each of the resources just to point out a few things to you. So I want to start with what was on my list, Callan, which is number 2 there, and really he's looking at, him and the authors are looking at, and I'm saying him, but it could be a she, who knows, looking at how to enhance motivation by developing cyclic self-regulated learning skills. So this is a very interesting article, and looking at the link between process and motivation, and really looking towards goal setting, the self-monitoring of goals, and promoting attributions. So I think this is one of the key things that I found in this article was looking for strategic and intentional self-regulated learning skills and goal setting. So I think as well included in this article, Zimmerman's model of self-regulated learning. So as you think about what you're doing for support self-regulated learning in the classroom as a teacher, I think you can, when you look at those the ideas presented in this particular article, I think it will be really good as you're reading it to think about what can I do if I wanted to increase motivation. These are some of the highlights. Okay, the next article is by Locke and Latham, and this particular article looks at the relationship between goals and performance, internal, external, and feedback, and the 8 categories of goal theory. And again, very interesting in looking at how you can help students set goals that are doable, and how to help them work through the process of goal setting to achieving the goals and all the learning along the way. Okay, so the next article is, even though it's old, 1990, it's still got some really good information. It's the Shunk article. Kind of looks like skunk, but shunk. And that's how I remember it. So here, I just love the beginning of this, saying, self-regulated learning occurs when students activate and sustain cognitions and behaviors systematically oriented toward attainment of learning goals. Self-regulated learning processes involve goal-directed activities that students instigate, modify, and sustain. These activities include attending to instruction, processing and integrating knowledge, rehearsing information to be remembered, and developing and maintaining positive beliefs about learning capabilities and anticipated outcomes of actions. Oh my, that is so golden when you think about, if you want to know what's driving your instruction, that's it. So how do you go about doing this? And I think that's the beauty of this article, is that it really takes you through that. And some of, I messed that up. The sub-processes of self-regulated learning, he talks about self-observation, self-judgment, self-reaction, and then going down to goal setting and how that affects self-efficacy as well. I love this quote on page 75 of the article. The notion that personal expectations influence behavior is not unique to self-efficacy theory. So again, expectancy value theory stressed that behavior is the joint function of beliefs about outcomes of actions and how much those outcomes are valued. So when you think about how to motivate students, that's exactly, these are the things. These are the keys to how to motivate students, because even though they might be motivated, you still have to have an aspect of learning in there. So I can't stress enough how these articles give you such wealth of information, and it might be a good idea to read them at a slow pace rather than trying to go through them quickly. So the next article is Walters, and this is a little bit of a lengthy article, but it's so important. And he starts off with self-regulated learning is often described as a function of students' motivation, cognitive strategy use, and metacognition. Now, if you want to think about how you support self-regulated learning, then you take that sentence and you go, okay, what is the functions that I can put in place to help students become motivated? What strategies am I going to intentionally teach them that are cognitive strategy use for goal attainment? And what are some of the self-questioning skills, the metacognition part, can I teach them to ask themselves? Because remember, self-regulated learning really is only as good as the questions that you ask yourself, and because that's all the part of the learning process. So models of self-regulated learning emphasize that students are more effective when they take a purposeful role in their own learning. And I think we've all agreed on that, and we've all looked at it. So I love this definition that he makes on the first page of the article, that self-regulated learning, the specific characteristics most often attributed to self-regulated learners concern their motivational beliefs or attitudes, their cognitive strategy use, and their metacognitive ability. So again, it goes back to the sentence that I just emphasized. Cognitive strategies that can readily and skillfully deploy to accomplish different academic tasks. So what are you doing as a teacher? What are those cognitive strategies? What do they look like? What do students know to do? Self-regulated learners also are perceived as metacognitively skilled regarding their awareness and use of cognitive strategies. So again, how can you develop metacognitive strategies or skills in students? Metacognitive knowledge about learning strategies specifically and about the learning process more generally. They are capable of monitoring their learning and generating internal feedback about their cognitive processing. They are also adept at modifying their learning behaviors in response to shifting situational demands or conditions. In short, self-regulated learners have high levels of knowledge about different cognitive learning strategies and have the ability to select, monitor, and regulate their use of those strategies when engaged in academic task. Now, I know that might seem like a lot, but just break it down. Break down each part of that paragraph that I just spoke on page 189 of the Walters article, and break it down and think about those ideas. Like what would you do as a teacher to give the students the skills to have like metacognitive skills or cognitive skills? Like what would you be doing? And then it goes looking at regulation of motivation and its relation to other aspects of self-regulated learning. Consistent with this inclusive view of regulation of motivation can be described as the activities through which individuals purposefully act to initiate, maintain, or supplement their willingness to start, to provide work toward, or to complete a particular activity or goal. My goodness, isn't that what we want students to do? You know, the willingness to start, maintain, initiate, and sustain, and at the end, achieve the learning outcome. So talk about golden when it comes to, as a teacher, those theoretical concepts, and here they are telling you what they are, and then now your plan is to make strategies for them. So that's exactly what this module is about, the support for self-regulated learning. And then distinguishing between motivation and regulation of motivation, it goes into a little bit in that article. Distinguishing between regulation of motivation and metacognition also talks about that. And these are also another part, regulation of motivation and volition. And these are, and then strategies for the regulation of motivation. As one critical dimension of regulating learning, students may know about and use many different strategies to regulate their motivation. And so it goes back to the question of, can you motivate students? Yes. Can you sustain it? You can give them the tools to do it, but it's kind of like the metaphor, like you can, lead the horse to water, but literally you cannot make that horse swallow water. So it's the same thing about motivation with your job as a teacher. and why we want to continue to make learners to be take ownership of their learning in every way. So the last article is Zimmerman and Schunk again. And this one talks just motivation and an essential dimension of self-regulated learning. So again, talking about definitions of self-regulated learning and how it's really connected with levels of motivation, and dissecting what these motivational issues are and the theories are, and key issues that seem to creep up with students when it comes to motivation. And then the role of key motivational constructs in self-regulated learning, goal orientation, sources of motivation and their role in self-regulated learning. And that's very interesting. That's table 1.1 on page 7 of the article. So take a few minutes to really go through that and dissect some of those discussion points. So the other thing I want to say about self-efficacy and outcome beliefs in self-regulated learning. So Bandura, and I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he talks a lot about self-efficacy, and what a person believes they're capable of will be what they're capable of. So, the mind is a very powerful tool that way. And he suggests labeled the former beliefs as self-efficacy, which refers to judgments of personal capabilities to organize and execute courses of action required to attain design types of goals. So also when I know we talk a lot about goals, but really if you think about it as learning goals rather than just goals, like, oh, my goal today is to do 10 minutes of yoga. Well, it's not really that kind of goal. Thinking of moving beyond and stretching those goals. Like today I want to be, learn my math tables and be proficient in them. That kind of goals. Or today I want to solve one math problem without having to get help from the teacher. So those are the kind of small, I call them like bite-sized goals that really if you help students set smaller goals like that, the idea is that they build self-efficacy. And again, as the statement just said, the more they believe that they're capable, the more they will do it. And we all know that when we believe we're capable of doing something and we have confidence in that and the self-efficacy to do it, we're more likely to do it rather than put it off, procrastinate, not do it, or become a behavior power in the classroom. Other thing is social motivation and self-regulated learning, because we all know that the social aspect is really important on a lot of our students in our classrooms nowadays. So I thought that I would go through each article this way, and I know it's a little bit timely, but I think it will help you as you're reading through. Module 4 activity, I would like you to really dig deep into how you would be doing specific strategies in your classroom to support and promote self-regulated learning, and connect these strategies to the specific theories from the resources. And then list 5 concepts that you could promote in your class towards self-regulated learning and how. So again, if you want to combine both and think of it like that, that's fine. But really what I'm looking at is that what you're going to do, I want to know that you understand the theory behind what you're doing. And not just say, I'm going to do think, pair, and share that as a strategy, but what's going to be the ins and outs? What's the concept behind that? And one of the things, I'll give you a hint for the, concepts in your classroom, is a concept that failure is a part of learning, and normalize that word failure. And I've discussed that before, because so often we think failure is a negative thing, but failure is a positive thing. And so the next module, module 5, will talk about the points of monitoring and feedback and how important they are. And the second part of your task for module 4 activity is to respond to another peer with a question or follow-up, response and providing a follow-up self-regulated learning strategy resource, something that we're building our libraries, okay? I want to add here just a little piece about the upcoming assignment number 3, the infographic student visual and peer feedback. Basically, I think you should work in pairs on this, and then you can take an infograph for each of the target areas: cognitive, metacognitive, behavior, and attitude. think of these as like anchor charts that you would use in your class. So when a student has a math problem and you want them to work through step by step, what would they do? What are some of the questions that they would ask? So that's the cognitive parts. You know, am I going to add? Am I going to subtract? Am I going to multiply? Am I going to divide? Which mathematical operation am I going to do in my problem? And then that can be step one. So what I want you to do is organize something in your infographic as like a anchor chart, and that would target the 4 areas that students could look at and say, I know what to do. And attitude, behavior, that can be very simple, sort of one line, you know, I can do this, right? Or something that's going to build stuff. I'm building, but use the words, I'm building self-efficacy. I can do this. Or even the part about someone, I can't remember who it was, I'm not there yet, right? So, and then the peer feedback process is, we'll post these in the discussion post, the assignments with the infograph, and then I want you to go and choose one, doesn't matter, someone that wasn't in your group, and I'm going to give you a little template, 2 stars and a wish, and then a guide of the criteria for the infograph, and you just review it, okay, based on whichever one you've chosen. So it's a good assignment for you to start thinking about how would you create anchor charts in your class for students to really link to the strategies that maybe you've chosen to discuss in this module. So I thought I would add this point in there so that it's a little bit of, you know, dialogue for upcoming, so everybody doesn't push the panic button and get too nervous. So I think you'll really enjoy this, and I'm okay with working in pairs. Pairs are 2, not 3. So if you want to work with a partner, that's great. Okay, so I hope you have a wonderful 2 weeks of learning, really thinking about self-regulated learning in your classroom, the real hands-on things that you would do right now and the strategies, but also understanding that the theory behind some of the strategies that you're using. And, you know, don't be afraid to explain that stuff to your students, because when they understand why they're doing something, it helps them with the understanding. So many understandings in there. So please, if you have any questions, email me. I'd be happy to set up a time to discuss some things if you like. I was really impressed with a lot of your discussions from the previous model, so I just want to make sure that you all know that, and I hope you're enjoying the course. So take care, everyone, and I'll see you again for Module 6. 5.